In 1857, Christian Renskers and his wife Jana Lemoness came to America, settling in Waukesha County, Wisconsin. They left Holland by boat with 7 children and were on the ocean for 7 weeks. While en route, cholera broke out, and one of their sons and a daughter died and were buried at sea. In 1858, Jana died in childbirth. Christian died 11 years later. Their child, Garrett William, Bill Renskers, went to Minnesota after his father died. He married Hattie Westlink and settled down to carpentering.
The Homestead Act was in operation, and people were going to Dakota to make use of the government's offer to obtain free land. The bug bit Bill, so he went with others to see what there was to see, which was mostly grass.
He filed on a preemption and in March of 1886 went alone to Dakota, leaving his family in Minnesota. Bill bought himself a yoke of oxen and a breaking plow, and soon had turned over enough of the virgin soil to build a sod house.
This preemption was located about 14 miles east from the Missouri River. The wood beams used for the ridge poles and rafters to support the roof were made from the cottonwood trees growing by the river.
This settlement, started in 1880, was known as the Holland Settlement, and was located in what now is south central North Dakota, Emmons County. And there were 8 or 10 Holland families when Renskers arrived.
By the beginning of April 1886, Renskers had his house ready, so he sent for his family to come from Minnesota.
The group consisted of Mrs. Hattie Renskers, Thomas, Charles, John, and Grandma, otherwise known as Minnie Grudebor, who was living with them.
The group traveled by immigrant car, which contained their furniture,
Some machinery,
a cow,
2 pigs,
chickens,
and the family.
to Ipswich, which was the end of the line.
This left them 90 miles from the sod house that Renskers had built. Renskers was in Ipswich with a covered wagon drawn by 2 horses. The road they had to travel was a rutted-out prairie trail.
On the 3rd day, it happened. Out there with the blue sky overhead, the sun shining brightly, miles from anywhere and nowhere to go, they were halted by the stork.
This was the first girl born to settlers of the Holland settlement, even though they had not even arrived there yet.
The following day, they decided to load up the patients and drive on to a Holland family living about 10 miles from where the new home was awaiting them. That worked out fine, and Hattie and baby Minnie, who became our grandma, stayed there 10 days.
Renskers started breaking up more virgin soil in preparation for seeding grain. They had brought with them various bushes, shrubs, rhubarb, potatoes, and all kinds of seed, and soon planted the potatoes, and a garden as well as oats and wheat and corn and flax.
Now, as it turned out, Grandma Grudebor also had the right to take a homestead. So they had land lying side by side. Another sod house was built, consisting of a living room and a bedroom on either side. The west bedroom was built on the land of Grandma, while the east one was on Renskers' land, so both were abiding by the law.
In 1886, a Reformed church was organized. The Renskers and Mina Grudebor were charter members of the Hope Reformed Church.
Renskers was an all-around handyman, in his own words, a jack of all trades but master of none. As all wooden wagons were used at that time, many times wheels needed resetting or sometimes spokes would fall out. So to Renskers it would go.
Perhaps a farmer's plow was not set right. Maybe a horse would have colic, or a cow might have difficulty in calving. He was also often the coffin maker and went about preparing the bodies for burial with the help of other neighbors. Everyone knew where Renskers lived and was assured of help.
Years passed. More children were born. 2 died. The family endured hardships and heartaches, joys and blessings.
In the spring of 1897, Grandma Grodeboer planted the garden. But in early summer, she became sickly. When Minnie told her that the beans were starting to bloom, she said, "That's good. I planted them, but I will not help eat them." In October, she died, 2 weeks before her 77th birthday.
Time was passing. The children were becoming young people, and Minnie was no exception. She matured very young and, being large, appeared older and further advanced than her age warranted. So she was attending young people's meetings and parties before being 14.
A certain young man named Henry TenClay had been paying attention to Minnie for quite some time. At first, Renskers didn't mind, but when he sensed Henry was getting serious, he objected. Although he really had nothing against Henry personally, he felt that Henry's age was too far advanced for him to be Minnie's husband.
In spite of the opposition, the courtship flourished. Henry popped the question, and Minnie said yes. So after an engagement of 11 months, the date was set for April 20th, 1904.
As Henry had been a hired man for many years, there were some things he was not going to do when he was his own boss. One of those was milking cows.
But Minnie knew that milking cows, But Minnie knew what milking cows had done for her parents, and that without milk cows, there would be no cash income, only from the crop, and that would never do.
It was a disgusted Henry that left the Renskers' home one evening after Minnie took a firm stand, telling him, "If that's the way you want it, I'm not sure I'm going to go along with it."
After considering the matter, he decided to talk to his brother-in-law about it. Noel said, "Minnie's right, Hank." Next time he came, he had better insight into the matter.
Now, Henry had a homestead with a claim shanty on it and 20 acres of land for cultivation. As he had been raising several colts through the years, he now owned 13 horses, 5 of which were mature workhorses.
His claim shanty was a 12 by 12 structure with shiplap flooring.
He had bought a house from a man who was going to move to Montana in the spring, so temporarily he decided we would live in the shanty, inside this shanty.
There was a homemade table, 4 chairs, and a small cook stove.
After that, there was moving in the bed that Minnie inherited from Grandma Grodeboer,
The organ her father brought for her,
Henry's trunk,
and 8 sacks of seeds stacked in one corner.
Plus shelves against the wall for dishes, etc.
there was a vacant space in the middle of the room, perhaps 4 by 6.
And oh yes, there was a big wooden box set on its side. On it was our water pail and wash basin. And inside of this was the kerosene can. It had a curtain hanging in front and a piece of oilcloth on the top.
Yes, it was a compact setup, but everything we needed was there. The tragic part was that the man Henry bought the house from did not move until in July. So boy, oh boy, was it hot in that shanty.
Now, the winter of 1903 to 1904 had been a hard winter. Many farmers were short of feed. But Henry was fortunate in that he had put up a lot of hay, and so had hay for sale. He traded hay for 1 cow. He traded 1 horse for 3 cows, and bought 2 more. 6 was our goal, but 1 did not have a calf, so we milked only 5 that year.
Shortly after we were married, we went to visit at the home of an older couple. They gave us 5 hens. Later, someone gave us a rooster. Then Ma came, bringing us a hen setting on a clutch of eggs. That was our start in poultry, 17 head the first winter.
We bought 2 small sows at $2 each, and that was the start of our way of livestock, except for a cat and a dog later that summer.
Henry already had constructed a small dam near his shanty, so we relied on that pond for water for the stock. However, there was a shallow well too. Henry had some machinery, but bought a new disc drill to put in the crop.
By now, we had a pretty good plan worked out, and things were going well. In July, finally, we moved the house we had bought onto our yard. It was 16 by 22, had 2 bedrooms and a general living room, 1 story. There was a cellar underneath.
That fall, we moved the claim shanty against the house to be used as a summer kitchen. However, that first winter it served as a granary.
When we moved into the house, we needed more furniture. A china closet, a range, and a bed were ordered from a catalog house in Minneapolis. 6 sturdy kitchen chairs were bought at $1.25 each. So we were doing fine.
During the summer, Henry, with the help of a friend, had built a stable for the cattle and work horses. The young horses stayed outside as grass was plentiful in the pasture.
After the crop was in that spring, Henry broke up 25 acres of virgin soil and put that into flax. No corn that year, as we had only the 2 pigs, so they ate barley. Henry had a sod stable before we married that was used for the pigs and chickens.
Henry had put up plenty of hay during the summer. He stacked that in 2 long stacks, side by side, with the ends against the stable.
No, he hauled and pitched it on the stack, but Minnie did the stacking. Sure, she had the muscle and the weight to pack it down. It was lots of fun working together wholeheartedly with one end in view. Yes, we came a long way that summer.
We were looking forward to an important happening in our lives. On February 4, 1905, our first baby was born, a little girl. No doctor. We named our daughter Margaret, shortened to Margie. As Henry wanted her to have 2 names, he chose Theodora, meaning gift of God. Our president at that time was Theodore Roosevelt.
Our family now was on its way, and we felt our homestead alone was not enough for a farm. West of it was a quarter for sale, but Henry was not quite sure that we were ready for such a move, as it meant going into debt for the $1,200 price. So in buying the land, we went into debt for $1,200 in March 1905. By 1909, the final payment was made. Then our farm was 320 acres.
Henry had broken up 25 acres more on our homestead in 1904, making it 45 acres, and he also rented a quarter near Hull, so our acreage and cropland was increasing. He also wanted to break up some of the ground we bought, so Minnie had more chores to do, especially the evening milking, and there was a little Margie to care for.
In the spring of 1904, we had bought 2 shoats, and they were bred, so we were going to have little pigs. One day in early June, Henry was seeding flax when a shower came up quite rapidly. Minnie started chores, going out to feed the 2 hogs. She found the one lying outside in labor, 1 piglet having arrived already. Minnie knew she must get her inside, but to move a farrowing sow is not easy.
In desperation, she got a feed pail, grabbed the little pig, put it in the pail, and ran with the angry sow in pursuit. She got the little pig inside, put it down, and climbed the partition, then ran and shut the door. That was an exciting adventure, but it worked. There were 10 more little pigs, making 11, and they all lived. The other sow had 12 pigs, so we raised 23 little pigs. That was a record-breaking experience.
An important event took place in our home on May 20, 1906, as our first son was born. Seeing that we had submitted to the Dutch custom of naming Margaret after Henry's mother, our son was named Garrett William, after his grandpa Renskers, but he was known as William, later as Bill.
1906 was an all-around good year for us. That summer, Henry decided we were too crowded, as we had only 2 bedrooms. Our farm had many stones, so there were some stone piles that Henry had dug out of the prairie he had broken up. More were dug out, and these were hauled home for the walls of the cellar and the foundation for the new house.
The new house that was being built was going to be 26 by 26 feet, with 10 feet of studding and a square roof. In July of 1907, we moved in, but it was not completely finished.
Shortly after this, on August 4, 1907, we were blessed with another daughter. She was named Hattie, after Grandma Renskers. Lucilla supplied the second name.
1908, on October 17, a dark, dreary, misty evening, Henry said, "Mama, I won't go out tonight even if you give me $10. But during the night the stork called, and Henry had to go out and get Mrs. Groon, who assisted us on those occasions. But when they arrived home, they were greeted by the sound of a crying infant. Yes, our Elsie had arrived, and was named Wilhelmina Elsie, after her mother and two of Henry's sisters. This gave us 3 girls and a boy."
The livestock had increased considerably too, and the stable and cattle shed were overfull. A lot of talking, planning, and figuring was done by us in the evenings with the new barn in mind, but we decided to wait and see what kind of a crop 1909 would bring.
The crop turned out pretty good, so during the summer, Henry and our hired man hauled a lot of stones for the foundation of the new barn. The barn was to be 56 feet long with a cupola for ventilation. There would be rooms enough in this barn for our cattle and work horses, and a feed bin. The young horses would be left outside with a straw pile for shelter.
Meanwhile, we were expecting an addition to our family, which was slow in arriving. It stormed so much the roads were not passable. Several nights before going to bed, Minnie got everything ready so that if the stork would come, we could manage by ourselves with the help of the great physician.
But when Dick finally came, the 5th of March, 1910, much of the snow had disappeared, so Henry could get Mrs. Groen. Again, when they arrived, however, they were greeted by the lusty cry of the baby. Dick was a born singer, all right. Then we had 2 sons, and this one was named after his paternal grandfather, Dirk Ellard.
After this, the men really started making headway. The barn would hold 60 tons of hay and was equipped with hay slings to pull the hay upstairs. From the ground to the peak of the barn was 32 feet. It was late April before it was finished.
As there was a considerable amount of lumber left from building the barn, we decided to build a summer kitchen on the south side of the house in 1911.
The spring was normal until June 5th. Henry was sowing flax when a thunder shower came up very rapidly. He had a couple of sacks of flax seed lying in the wagon that must not get wet. Realizing that he could not get home before the rain, he laid the sacks of flax on the ground and dumped the wagon box over it. Then he came home at top speed, riding on the reach of the wagon.
That was a terrible storm. Some windows in the house were broken as there was so much hail. The crop that was up was totally destroyed, and the prairie grass was hailed out of the ground. That was the only rain we had that summer, so there was no crop, but only weeds, mostly Russian thistles. We were milking 10 cows, and they lived on weeds, among which was mustard that gave a terrible taste to the milk.
As there had not been much snow the previous winter, there was no water in the pond. So what to do about water? We already had sold the young stock, but if we sold the cows, we would have no income.
After much praying, we decided to sell the cows and trust the Lord to provide for us. This was Monday evening, and we would sell the cows on Friday.
We must both have prayed ourselves to sleep that night, and we slept well. The next morning, Minnie woke up with a definite plan in her mind. She woke Henry and eagerly asked him, "Is there a low place on the northeast corner of our land?"
Henry answered, "Yes, there is, right by the road. Why do you ask?"
"Well, you must dig a well there," Minnie said.
Apparently, he realized this was no passing thought, so he went to a neighbor to get his test auger and set out to see what he could accomplish.
He bored down 14 feet, and there the ground was wet. He went back to the neighbor, and together they dug a hole about 3.5 feet across. When they got down 15 feet, they were sure there was water, so they went down to 16 feet deep.
So, by Saturday evening, they had it ready to go. A tank had been brought up and a pump put in. Our hearts were filled with gratitude, as we did not need to sell our cows. Truly, truly an answered prayer. Minnie went to the well 3 times every day. And every time when the tank was full, the well was empty. So it needed more reservoir. They dug it 3 feet deeper, and then it was good.
That fall, our little Margaret started school.
On December 20, 1911, we were blessed with the arrival of our 4th daughter. She was named Joanne Edna after my brothers John and Edward.
In 1913, on April 30th, we were blessed with our 3rd son. He was named Henry James after his father.
That summer, an important thing happened to our Holland settlement in that a local man felt our community should have telephone service, and he worked hard to put it across. The switchboard was located in Westfield, and a service was provided for the surrounding territory, which was divided into party lines of as many as 17 families on one line. The rent was $18 per year.
A clever arrangement, and much appreciated, was that every Saturday evening at 7 o'clock, the operator rang 5 shorts, so everyone had the right time for Sunday. This also was done in emergencies and in case of death. 7 shorts were rung, and the name of the deceased and the time for burial was announced.
On December 29, 1914, our 4th son was born. He was a plump little curly head. We named him John Raymond. So now we had 4 boys and 4 girls. John liked to refer to himself as the hub of the wheel.
In 1915, the banker in Haworth became interested in Holstein cattle. So Renskers bought some heifers, and through that, Henry became interested. By this time, Henry knew that there was money in milking cows, so he too would like to build up our herd. However, he had to think it over, for as a whole, the people were not in favor of Holsteins. Henry had gotten over his dislike for milking, and with the children growing up, the future looked pretty good. So in 1916, we got a Holstein bull to head our herd.
1915 to 1916 was a hard winter with much snow, and it began breaking up. On February 26th, Minnie hemorrhaged very badly. The doctor was called, but the roads were terrible. Although he had a car, the road was not fit to use. So he got a livery rig with a driver, yet it took over 4 hours to make the 20 miles to the house. But prayers were answered, and Dr. Wolverton said if another half hour had passed, it would have been too late. The doctor soon found the trouble under the guidance and supervision of the great physician, and finally the trouble was over.
The result of this case was a great change in our lives.
Although Henry and Minnie both were raised in Christian homes, there was a great deal of difference in the attitude of giving for the cause of Christ and his kingdom. Where the Renskers were generous in their giving, Henry's parents were not. So there was some friction in our home due to this situation.
As the children grew up and attended church, Sunday school, catechism, etc., there was always the call for an offering, so that ran into money. Minnie had prayed that the Lord would help us to see eye to eye in this matter.
Some days after this sickness occurred, Henry took some hogs to town. When he came home, he was in fine spirits, as it had been a good day in a financial way, and his heart overflowed with gratitude, especially for my recovery. The next day was Sunday and mission offering.
So in view of his gratitude on Sunday,
I suggested that we prove our gratitude to God by giving a special gift in this mission offering. It appealed to Henry at once, and he asked how much. I left that to him, and he made it a very generous gift. After he came home, he was very happy and glad that he had made that gift.
We were led to discuss this more, and tithing our income was brought up. In May of that year, we decided to give 1/10 of our cash income. This would mean that when we sold any produce, grain, cattle, cream, eggs, or anything else, we would give 1/10 of that gross income to the Lord.
That decision was a bit difficult to make, but we felt the Lord was guiding us, and no other decision has given us the real joy that this one did. The result was that there was always tithing money on hand for whatever religious cause that came along.
No more bickering, and we never regretted making the decision. Even though we went through difficult situations, the Lord got his tithe, and as a family, we were richly blessed.
In 1917, February 20th, our 5th son was born, and we named him Albert Harold for his father's brother, Albert.
By this time, we had 5 children attending school. The building was old and much too small, so during this summer, Emmons County had its first county agent, and a series of community picnics were held for him and the people to get acquainted. They were held at various schoolhouses. The picnic we attended was held at the Renskers School in Union Township. A new schoolhouse had been built and was in use, but the old building remained and the picnic was held there.
We lived in the Baker District. During the course of the day, Minnie visited with the school superintendent, and during the conversation, Minnie said, "It seems to me this rejected building is better than the one in Baker where our children go. How come?"
It is, he said, but no one has ever made a complaint against it, so it continues to be used.
Minnie said, "What is required to have it condemned?"
Well, someone must circulate a petition through your district and get a certain number of signatures and then present it to the school board at their meeting.
Henry and Minnie talked it over that evening. The next morning was rainy, so Henry said, "I can't work in the field. Why don't you write out a petition and I'll go around today?"
The result was that the following year we had a nice new 2-room building. The one room was for the lower 6th grades and the other for the 7th through 10th grades. There was a time that we had 7 children attending that school.
By this time, we had quite a herd of milk cows and needed more pasture. John Hawk, southeast in the same section, had put up his land for sale. We had been looking forward to this and bought it for $4,000. So we owned 3/4 of section 35, making our farm rectangular.
Then there was a big job ahead of us, as a fence must be built around it. But that too was accomplished, and we had one of the finest pastures around, covering 190 acres.
On May 31st, 1919, our family size was increased with another son. By this time, people engaged a doctor when a baby was expected, so we fell in line with that too. There had been a heavy rain, so Doc got stuck in the mud. And when he finally did arrive, the baby was there, and we named him Charles, for my brother who had passed away. And as the second name, we chose Marion. So now we had 4 girls and 6 boys.
By this time, our herd was increasing, but milking was no problem as there were now 5 children old enough to milk cows. Not only was their family increased, but financially also.
We now had 6 children in school. All had good attendance. But the 1st of December, Elsie was not feeling well. So Henry took her to the doctor, who diagnosed her ailment as appendicitis, and surgery must be performed. After the surgery, Doctor told Henry that although the appendix had not yet ruptured, it was a pus case, and her abdominal condition was unusual, as there was not partition of division between the organs. The pus was already through her whole abdomen, so he held out very little hope for her recovery.
But, he said, if she holds on till Sunday noon, there is hope. This was Thursday evening. By Sunday noon, the condition had not changed, so we hoped.
Henry stayed with her at the hospital, as I could not leave the children, although I did go to see her.
Her mind was good, and I talked to her, and felt she should know her condition, so I gently told her that she might not recover. With no hesitation, she calmly said, "Well, then I'm going to Jesus." She clearly specified that the little money she had in her purse we must send to the mission so other children could learn to know Jesus.
Much to the doctor's surprise, she lived until the next Thursday, when she quietly passed away. Henry and I were at her bedside watching her as she opened her eyes and looked up, and in a moment her face was transfigured, and her eyes showed that she saw something that we did not see. And she was gone to be with Jesus. It was December 11th, and she was 11 years old.
Later that winter, the influenza broke out. Our whole family, except Dick, came down with it. He was 9 years old. What a help that boy was. We all recovered, and when it was time for field work, we were all right.
Then, in the latter part of May 1920, an epidemic of measles broke out, and our children all got them. Charlie was the baby. He could walk nicely before he got sick, but when we got over the measles, he had to learn to walk all over again. Due to being weak, he developed the worst case of bow legs I ever saw, but eventually he outgrew them, and there were no other ill effects.
Yes, everything was going well. We had bought a header so Henry could harvest his crop with no outside help. On March 15, 1921, another son was born to us, and we named him Ralph Gerald. Our pastor wrote up the community news, and in writing about Ralph's birth, he commented, "Now Henry stands even with Job, 7 sons and 3 daughters. We wonder whether his patience will be equal to Job's."
And that ends the first half of Grandma's story. So we will finish it tomorrow. Now we just may go and visit.